These are the letters, 518 of them, that tell my dad's story. Each one starts much the same, my dearest Martha. My dad had been working with a custom hay baling crew and helping out on the family farm near Steen, Minnesota. He was 23 years old the day he left. The night before, he drove the 25 miles to George, Iowa to say goodbye to his girlfriend and future wife, Martha, my mom. He was among 16 young men who boarded a bus in front of the courthouse in Laverne and left Rock County that day. It was the only time he ever saw his dad cry.
April 29th, 1942.
Fort Snelling was processing over 800 men a day.
Person's always under orders. We have to learn 100 things a day. I am now Private Roy Aukus.
Dad stayed at Fort Snelling less than a week, then traveled by train to Jefferson Barracks, Missouri for a month of boot camp training.
Today we took more aptitude tests, and tomorrow morning we interview for the job we'd like. I signed up for airplane mechanics. If I made a good mark today, I'll probably get it.
But a word of advice from his commanding officer would change everything.
As I sat down with him, he looked at my papers and said, "Soldier, you're a smart man. I got such a high mark in mechanical movements that only 1 out of 100 get a mark like that." I told him I would rather have a mechanic job, but he said, "Son, don't waste your time." So I signed up as an aircraft radio technician operator. Halsey, do you think I did the right thing? I hope I make it okay.
Classes at Scott Field went round the clock in multiple shifts to accommodate the thousands of new recruits.
My instructor said to learn all I could while I was in school. When we get sent out to our squadron, there won't be anyone there to help us. I feel, like some of the others, that we don't know enough about the whole thing. Sometimes I feel a tiny bit afraid of what the future will hold for me, but I'm sure the Lord is watching over us. Take this very brave, pal. It won't be long until I'm a long ways away.
A troop train took Dad from Illinois through Texas to San Francisco. He left the U.S. mainland on November 7th and arrived at Wheeler Airfield in Hawaii a week later.
It's beautiful here. Just think of the different climates you and I are in. You perhaps shivering in your winter coats, and I getting a kick out of running around in shirt sleeves. After a few hours of moving and a few days of getting settled, I once more find myself thousands of miles further away from you, somewhere in the jungles of the deep Southwest Pacific. It's really life in the rough here. More ants than any picnic, bats as big as black crows, and more mosquitoes than Minnesota could ever claim. Another Sunday is here and nearly gone. In your last letter you mentioned that you liked the hymn, "Anywhere with Jesus, I can safely go." I remember the last time I heard that hymn. It was in Hawaii just before I left. I knew I was leaving, where I was going, and it seemed a long, long way. Honey, I prayed for our safety and that all would work out well. Just then, like an answer to my prayer, just as I was leaving, someone had his radio on, and that hymn was being sung.
During wartime, it's the boys overseas that you worry about. Dad's youngest brother, Elvin, had his enlistment deferred so he could stay home and help on the farm. Everyone assumed that he was out of harm's way until they got the news.
My dear, dear Martha, I received a very sad message from home through the Red Cross today telling me of Alvin. I just sat there and read it over and over again and still don't believe it. The message read that it was a train auto accident. A bolt of lightning couldn't have hit me any harder. I feel as if I could cry like a baby, but I'll try to hold myself until tonight, after I go to bed, when I can sneak a few tears all by myself. I moved again to a new station at an advanced New Guinea base right in Japanese territory. I'm living in the thickest jungle I've ever seen. Honey, you should see the unusual furniture us boys create to make our places seem more like home. Everything from chairs to cupboards. I finally quit wearing underwear. It was just too hot and just an extra thing to wash. When I've had about all the traveling and jungle I can stand, I think of those good old days, working in that Minnesota dust on a spring day, and in the evening, when I'd come to see you, and you'd always find a speck of dust in that trick corner of my ear, and exclaim, "Halsey, your ears are dirty again."
News in the hometown paper kept Dad in touch with the community, but was also a reminder his life was on hold for now.
I got a note from Al, the editor of the Star Herald. He asked me to write a letter about my experiences here that he could print in the paper. Seems like someone is always getting married. Someday we'll have our name in that column, and someday we'll have a junior and sissy of our very own. But for now we have a big job to do, so we'll have to be real brave and keep our chin up and do our work well. I had 2 more packages from home today. It never seems like Christmas when one is away. Once more this year, I'll say, just as I have on each one of the others, I hope and pray I can make it home for the next one.
In the summer of '45, with the end of the war in sight, points were on everybody's mind. How many do you have, and when will you have enough to come home?
So a lot of people are asking when I'll be back. It makes it kind of rough on a fella, sweating these things out. August 10th, 1945. Received the news rather calmly tonight that the war was over. Instead of celebrating, I can't help but think about it a bit seriously. Everything has been so mixed up the past few days. Somehow I've found very little time to give it any thought. I'm hoping against hope that I'll be on this month's list of men going home. Pal, it's just gotta be. My darling Martha, I have wonderful news. I'm coming home at last. One thing I can say is that I'm really proud of this unit. I guess we're recognized as one of the hottest units out here. Pal, I know I'll find some big changes when I reach home. Kids grown up and married, people gone that I once knew, and so many other things. Perhaps you and I changed a tiny bit too, but our change has been together, towards loving each other more and more, and understanding this whole world in a much better way. Pal, we do have so many years to catch up on.
On September 14th, Dad scribbled a quick note that he was leaving on the first leg of his trip. 5 weeks later, he rode into George, Iowa aboard the Illinois Central. Martha boarded the train and rode the rest of the way back to Steen with Roy for his homecoming. They were married 25 days later on November 16th. They made their home on the Minnesota farm where Dad was born, lived there together for over 50 years, and raised a family. The junior and sissy they dreamed about, 3 boys and 2 girls. Now, some 60 years later, my children, nieces and nephews, are about the same age as their grandpa and grandma were when they were writing these letters. And they too are trying to find their way, falling in love, and coming of age. And these letters, a gift and a reminder about the sacrifice of duty and the joy of coming home.